Thank you for tuning in to Raising Global Leaders. Today, I have the wonderful opportunity of interviewing the incredible Lee David Daniels. He's a public speaker, he's a blogger, and he wrote the book Grit for Kids. I'm so excited to have you here today, Lee. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Leanna. I'm very happy to be here as well.
Awesome. So before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about what got you into blogging about parenting and leadership? And then what led to Grit for Kids?
Sure. So, parenting is a topic I feel very strongly about. I have two boys of my own, and it's just something that occurred to me. It's so easy to make a wrong move in this world for kids. There's so many opportunities and pitfalls that it's really important to have a roadmap for helping them at least develop their own personalities and for growing and succeeding. So that kind of it was my natural passion. And I included that to go to blogging. And then, I read Angela Duckworth's Grit book, which I think is the definitive volume on grit. And I was hooked. So it was really good reading, but very high level, very scientific. So I thought I wanted to develop grit in my kids. So I looked around, I looked on the web, I found absolutely nothing. There was really nothing out there to do that. So I started interviewing other parents, went on the web, and I realized there's a lot of need there. So that's what led me to write the book and have led me to kind of continue the passion with grit.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you were able to do that research and bless all of us parents with your wisdom and guidance on the topic. Can you explain what exactly is grit and why is it important for children to develop this skill?
Sure. So grit, as defined by Angela Duckworth, is passion and perseverance to achieve your goals, in a nutshell. So what it is the ability to find out what is important to a person and the ability to plan out the steps that it takes to get to what's really important and the ability to overcome the setbacks that always happen along the way. That's what grit is. Now, in regards to why is it important to develop it in your kids, it's because with kids, there are so many distractions, video games, friends, just different things they could do. It's important for them to get their vision and their goals in line and a plan to get there to keep them busy, not only out of trouble, but to actually make sure that those goals are achieved.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that it's both passion and perseverance. So
Yes.
what happens when you are dealing with something you want your kids to really want them to persevere, but it's something they're not passionate about, like schoolwork or maybe an activity that you've given them to challenge them? How do you encourage grit when there seems to be a lack of passion?
Sure. Question. So what we can do is, and it's not a direct science here, but what I've done with my kids personally is that I've tried to get reading. Okay, my kids just don't want to read. So what I've done is I try to tie it into something they do feel passionate about. So if they feel passionate about learning about sports, for instance, my youngest lives, breathes basketball. That's what he loves. So I got him a bunch of books on basketball teams. So now he's got maybe not the passion for reading, but he's got the perseverance to keep learning because that's what he was really interested about. As long as you can tie it into something they're interested in, you can succeed.
That is great advice. Thank you for that. I love how you took something and really made it practical. I think that tying it into our children's passion is something that we can all relate to and it's something that we can all do. So how does your book help us develop grit in our kids?
Sure. So the book is written for really anyone involved with kids, right? It's written for parents, grandparents, foster parents, caretakers, uncles, aunts, etc. The book provides a roadmap. It's 16 steps to develop grit in your kids. This is actually a roadmap in the way it's organized, so you can take it from top to bottom and actually follow it in order to get grit for your kids, to develop the grit. Plus, it's in every chapter, there's examples with using real life situations of how this may apply, and also questions you can ask your kids. So it forces you to kind of think about it more for your own situations. Everybody's different, right? Everybody has different things they're trying to work on. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I've got very list of helpful resources in the back of the book, different blogs of different other people that I was very impressed with that I direct people to. So that's also there. So that's all it is. Also, the book has chapters that are really short, right? They're not long scientific volumes. It's just short to the point, something you can do on the train, on the bus, in between your meetings, whatever it is. So that's all those things together, I think, kind of sets it apart and helps help parents develop grit.
Awesome. I would agree. I love the handbook style. So it's not like you're forgetting the first step by the time you get to the 16th step. And it's easy to refer back to, so that when you're faced with something, you're like, how should I, start to incorporate that? You can go through your steps easily. Awesome. Sure. Thank you for that. So can you give me an example of incorporating grit? What does that look like from a parent maybe that's homeschooling their kids? And we have some parents that are tuning in that have their kids in an educational institution, whether it be public school or private school or charter schools. So what does it look like for us to teach our children grit? Give us an example.
Right. So one example is that I use all the time, repeatedly, is planning. So my child has this desire to go to the NBA, right? So it's a lofty goal. So I said, well, how are you going to get, oh, by the way, he's 8, just in case you're interested. So how are you going to get from here to there? So one thing is we laid out a vision. The vision he has. Going to the NBA. Okay, you break that down. So you plan out all the steps of how to get there, right? It's like building a foundation for a building. You don't just start with a building, you start with the foundation. So in other words, you break it down into steps. Okay, well, I need to get to a good basketball team for my level for this area. Then I need to get on the middle school team and the high school team. Then I need to get to a college that's famous for basketball. I got to do real well. I have to work on these goals. It's like step after step after step. The smaller the individual step, the more chances you have of succeeding. And also your child won't be overwhelmed by 300 different things that they need to do for a goal that seems really far away. So it's that breaking down the steps. And what's also important is follow-up. So the child will make up the steps, and then they might lose interest, they might get distracted. It's the ability to sit down with them maybe on a weekly basis and say, well, you said you're going to do this at the beginning of the week. Did you? If you didn't, what was the block? Why didn't you do it? And help them get over that.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a really good example. I like how you said the smaller the step, the more likely they are to succeed. As parents, sometimes we want to see the big steps, and we wait for those big milestones. And I think it kind of passes on to our kids for them to look forward to those big milestones instead of making the steps as small as possible and then focusing on succeeding at that level.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. Okay, so you recently blogged about the surprise benefits of being hurt. Can you talk about that and how that ties into developing grit? Why is it important for our children to experience being hurt?
Question, Leanna, thank you for that. What happens is, and happens to everybody, is that they're going to experience a setback. They're going to experience something. For instance, they're going to go out, they're going to say compete in some sort of, let's say, like a math Olympics, right? And they think they're great, they think they're wonderful, and they go up against other kids and they get beat. They get completely beat. So they're hurt, right? Another situation is somebody in the playground picks on them, right? They may get in a fight, they lose. Again, they get hurt. So it's bad. As parents, we want to help them. We want to cover for them. We want to handle the problem. But that's not what you want to do. That's how they learn to come back. And they will need to do this for their entire life. So there's a benefit when you're hurt, when a child is hurt, either well, physically is different, but mentally, from a mental perspective, they learn to, you can sit with them, you can problem solve, or if they do it themselves, good as well. It's the ability to overcome obstacles, which I think is one of the key things that we can teach them as parents, and they can learn themselves. It's the ability that, yes, I'm hurt now, but guess what? I got over it and I'm moving on.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. There's a saying that kids don't do what they hear, they do what they see.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we as parents and teachers and community leaders, how can we provide them with examples of grit? How can we increase our capacity for grit so that we can be models for the children in our lives?
Well, what we can do is all the things that are in the book. In fact, that's one of the things that I've learned that people wrote to me, which I didn't even have intended, but came true, is that a lot of people are using the book to develop grit in themselves because they find the same thing. The best way to model that is you model things, you show the kids what you're doing. So for instance, I sit down with my kids, and I know my friends do as well, and other people that have written to me, that they actually share, here's my goals, here's what I'm trying to achieve this year, whether it be promotion or whether it be buying a new car or traveling somewhere, whatever the goal happens to be. And this is how I'm getting there. That helps you kids see that you're not just talking about this, you're actually doing it. Here's a real situation of how you're applying these principles. Or perhaps you always wanted to learn Spanish. Well, that's a goal. How are you doing that? What are you doing about that? It's those kind of things. They see that. If you're living it, like you just said, your kids are much more likely to follow what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So how transparent do you want to be about your struggles when it comes to sharing those things with your kids? I know a lot of parents are trying to find the balance between being real with their kids, but also wanting their kids to see the end result of the process as well. So how do we find that balance when it comes to grit?
Right. So a friend of mine, I can give you a great example very recently. A friend of mine recently got laid off from his job for many years. So, in some ways, it's something you don't necessarily want to shout from the rooftops about. But he sat down with his kids and he explained to them that this is what you could say a failure at the moment. It's a setback, and it does happen. So, important thing to tell them whenever there's a setback is that you have a plan. How are you going to overcome it? Whatever that setback is, how are you dealing with it? So in this case, he laid out that, okay, I'm updating my resume, I'm contacting my friends, I'm contacting recruiters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the kids got reassured and they saw that whenever there's a setback, first thing you do is take a seat and find out, how am I getting out of it? Not panicking, just making a plan.
I love that. That's so important to have a plan. And when you, I think when you share it that way, it improves confidence too. Like, okay, dad's got it under control. We don't have to freak out or anything. It's going to be okay because dad has a plan.
Right.
I think that that's really important. So it seems like a lot of your examples in the book and here on this interview are very community based, like having people that you're being accountable to when it comes to your goals and these small steps. So how important would you say is community um, to developing grit? Do you think that that's vital?
Community is, I think, very important to developing grit. Uh, Not in a direct sense, but in a sense of the different models that you have. So if you have a church-based group, for instance, or a particular association, your kids can see how other adults handle developing grit, how they handle setbacks, how they plan. Because look, we're parents, but we're human beings, right? We don't have all the answers. I can't pretend to have all the answers and every example from my child that they're ever likely to encounter. But other people have different situations. They can see how other adults handle it or not handle it.
Right.
See it that way. So I think community is extremely important for them in terms of modeling behavior.
Awesome. So, what are some things that you're working on right now? Like, what are some of your projects or your upcoming speaking engagements? What are some things that are going to be happening that we should be on the lookout for?
Oh, okay. I'm super excited. I'm glad you asked. I'm super excited about the next book that I'm writing, actually, because with grit, it just occurred to me, with kind of from your previous question, is that, well, adults need to model more of this, of these behaviors. So I'm actually writing a book about grit for relationships. So I've been married for over 20 years, and we had ups and downs like any other couple. And I realize in a way that you need to have this perseverance and passion to make your marriage last and to show your kids of how it can last. And I got really passionate about that as well. So I'm actually in the process of writing that right now. Hopefully in a few months, I should have a draft out. So I'm really, really excited about the topic. Uh, I started a little bit just for fun, really, because my youngest asked me, is a book about traveling. It's actually an illustrated children's book about two boys and a girl that travel in a pouch of a magical kangaroo around different countries. So just something that came to me one time. My child really kind of really liked it. So I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go. So those are the two things that I'm working on right now, as well as open to any other speaking engagements, but nothing in the near future at the moment because I'm so busy writing these books.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited about reading Grit for Relationships in the future because I do think that relationships greatly impact the lives and development of our children. And so I'm sure that that book is going to be absolutely life-changing. And I know that my kids will be looking forward to reading about a kangaroo with a magical pouch. I mean, their minds would be blown. They'd be so excited about that, to travel the world that way and to really engage their imagination. So that's awesome. So going back to Grit for Kids, and I thought about this when you mentioned your Grit for Relationships, but what are some other leadership traits that coincide with grit that can either strengthen grit or work alongside with grit that you feel are important to implement in our children?
I really think a very important skill is the ability to communicate your vision. So a lot of leaders that I've met, heard, and even worked for had a vision. They did, but they could not communicate it to anybody. And most importantly, they couldn't convince anyone else to follow their vision and to make it happen. I think it's very, very important for a leader, especially a global leader, who has to deal with lots of cultures and lots of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. That's a lot of things that can happen there. Obstacles will be had. The way to overcome it is to have that vision and to be able to, so everyone understands what needs to happen, what their role in your vision actually is. That, I think, is a very, very important trait for a global leader to develop.
That's awesome. I think that it's incredible because that ties directly into grit. Like, you have to have passion to communicate your vision, but you also have to have perseverance to keep finding ways to connect to your audience when the first ways aren't working. to try to keep finding those ways until you reach that desired connection. So that's incredible. I'm just so honored to be able to glean from your wisdom and knowledge on grit for kids. It's amazing. So how can we get in touch with you? How can the watchers, and for those who are listening, like in their car or whatnot, how can we get in touch with you and your work, and where can we find your book and your upcoming book?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, first things first, I have a website. It's www.leedaviddaniels.com. I have a Facebook page, Lee David Daniels author, I think it's called, something like that. My books can be found on Amazon, exclusively for Amazon. So until recently, I was on Google Plus until that went away. And I'm also on Twitter as well. But most of the time, I'm either on Facebook or on the website.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on today and allowing me to interview you. And I'm sure that our listeners and our viewers will be very excited to have this information from you as well. Thank you, Lee.
Oh, you're welcome, Leanna, and I wish you the best and have a great time. Thank you.